Hey there. I always love a good mystery, and from the looks of it, you've given us a real head-scratcher this time.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be exploring apostolic succession in the Orthodox Church.
Okay.
And, you've given us some pretty in-depth sources, so
hmm
I'm guessing you're already familiar with some of the basics here.
Yeah.
So instead of just, starting with like a basic definition of apostolic succession,
Right.
what are some of the maybe more like nuanced or even surprising aspects of this whole concept?
Well, one thing that I think often gets overlooked is that there's more to it than just lineage.
Okay.
You see, in the Orthodox Church, it's not enough for a bishop to simply be ordained
Mm-hmm.
in a line going all the way back to the apostles.
So it's more than just being part of some ancient
Yes.
spiritual family tree.
Exactly. It's a three-legged stool.
Okay.
You got direct lineage, you have to maintain Orthodox doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be in full communion with other Orthodox bishops.
Gotcha.
All three are absolutely essential.
So all three legs of that stool are needed.
Absolutely. For the Orthodox Church, apostolic succession is a living, breathing thing.
Okay.
It's about continuity of teaching and practice, not just some historical pedigree.
That's really interesting. It kind of makes me wonder, are those three legs always seen as equally important?
Uh-huh.
Or are there times when maybe one leg is considered
Right.
more important than the others?
That's a great question, and it's one that's been debated for centuries.
Okay.
But to really understand the weight that the Orthodox Church places on apostolic succession,
Yeah.
we need to go back to the very beginning.
Okay.
One of the sources you shared mentions this fascinating story about Saint Irenaeus of Lyons in the 2nd century.
Oh, yeah.
He was battling against the Gnostics,
The Gnostics.
who claimed to have secret knowledge.
Weren't they kind of like the
Yeah.
conspiracy theorists of the ancient world, always whispering about hidden truths
Yeah, that's a pretty apt comparison.
and secret teachings and all that?
Yeah, and their claims actually posed a real threat to the early church.
I bet.
So how did Irenaeus combat them? He pointed to apostolic succession,
Okay.
specifically the publicly known lineage of bishops and the consistency of teaching across different churches.
So he was basically saying if there were any secret teachings,
Right.
wouldn't they have shown up in the church's official teachings somewhere along the line?
Exactly. He argued that the very existence of this public, unbroken line of bishops,
Mm-hmm.
all teaching the same core doctrines, proved that the Gnostics' claims of secret knowledge were bogus.
I never thought about it that way, but that's actually a really clever argument.
Yeah.
So by emphasizing apostolic succession, Irenaeus wasn't just, refuting a heresy.
Right.
He was also kind of solidifying the role of bishops as guardians of the faith.
Yeah.
He was shaping the structure of the church.
It's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
And it highlights just how pivotal this concept was, even in the early centuries of Christianity. It wasn't just some abstract theological idea. Right. It had real-world implications for how the church was organized and how authority was understood.
It's amazing how these debates from centuries ago can still resonate with us today.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this 2nd century bishop using apostolic succession to fight off heresy
Yeah.
and define church structure.
Right.
What else can we learn from those early days of Christianity?
Well, the sources you provided also point to a scriptural basis for this whole idea of apostolic authority.
Okay.
There are several verses in Acts and Paul's letters that really demonstrate the authority and reverence given to the apostles.
What kind of verses make that clear?
One that stands out is Acts 5.13.
Okay.
It says that despite the high regard people had for the apostles,
Uh-huh.
no one else dared join them.
Interesting.
I talk about an aura of authority.
Yeah, they had a reputation, clearly.
It's like people sensed that there was something different, something unique about these individuals.
So it's not even just that people respected them.
Yeah.
It's almost like they were a bit intimidated.
Yeah.
Like they recognized that there was something set apart about them.
Exactly. It's almost like they carried this undeniable spiritual weight.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really interesting. How was that authority transmitted?
Oh, good question.
That's where the concept of ordination comes in.
Right. It's not about being, a blood relative of an apostle.
Right.
It's about receiving that same spiritual authority.
Exactly.
And in the Orthodox Church, they believe that happens through ordination, right?
Precisely. And your sources offer some intriguing examples of this practice from the early church.
Yep.
Take, for instance, Acts 14.23,
Okay.
where it describes Paul and Barnabas appointing elders in each new church.
So even in the earliest days, they had a system for passing on leadership and authority.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just something that happened by chance.
Right.
Do you think they were just trying to keep things organized, or was
Yeah.
there like a deeper understanding of what was happening during those ordinations?
That's a fascinating question, and it leads us to one of the most dramatic accounts of ordination in the New Testament.
Okay.
The story of Ananias restoring Saul's sight in Acts 9:15-19.
Oh, wow. I remember that story. Saul, who would later become Paul,
Yeah.
was blinded by this light from heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and Ananias was sent to heal him
Yeah.
and baptize him.
Uh,
It's a powerful scene, but how does it relate to ordination?
well, one of your sources suggests that this event wasn't just about restoring Saul's physical sight.
Okay.
It argues that Ananias may have also bestowed the chrismeton on Saul during that encounter.
The chrismeton.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to admit, I've never heard that word before. What does it mean?
It's a Greek word that refers to this special anointing or seal of the Holy Spirit,
Uh-huh.
often associated with ordination.
Okay.
And the text seems to hint that this event was a pivotal moment, not just for Saul's conversion,
Mm-hmm.
but also for him receiving the spiritual authority to become the Apostle Paul.
Wow, that adds like a whole other layer to that story.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder if there was more going on in those early ordinations than we might initially realize.
Right.
But it also raises another question.
Hmm.
How did they choose who to ordain?
Yeah.
It's not like they had formal seminaries or application processes back
And
then.
you're absolutely right. And your sources point to another fascinating story
Right.
that gives us a glimpse into that selection process, the story of Matthias replacing Judas as an apostle in Acts 1:15-26.
Oh, right. They didn't just pick a random guy off the street to be an apostle.
No.
They prayed, they considered the candidates carefully,
Right.
and ultimately they cast lots to discern God's will.
Mm-hmm.
They took the process very seriously.
They did, and that story reveals something really important about the early church's understanding of apostolic succession.
Okay.
It wasn't just about lineage, it was about seeking God's guidance in selecting those who would carry on the ministry of the apostles.
Mm-hmm.
It was about ensuring that the right people were chosen to lead the church.
So we've got scriptural examples of ordination. We've got St. Irenaeus using apostolic succession to combat heresy.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got glimpses into how they chose those who would carry on the apostolic ministry.
Yeah.
It seems like this concept has been around for a while. Is there any other evidence from the early church that supports this idea?
There is, your sources mention several early church fathers who clearly supported the idea of apostolic succession.
Okay. Names, please. Who are we talking about here?
Well, there's Clement of Rome, who wrote a letter to the Corinthians.
Okay.
We have Hegesippus, who wrote a history of the church.
Uh-huh.
And then we have Tertullian,
Okay.
a prolific writer from the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries.
Wow.
These are some of the earliest voices that we have from outside the New Testament,
Okay.
and they all speak to the importance of this concept.
What did they have to say about apostolic succession?
Well, they definitely built on the scriptural foundation.
Okay.
But they also added their own unique perspectives based on their experiences and observations. What's fascinating is that despite their different backgrounds and contexts,
Yeah.
they all emphasized the continuity of teaching within the church
Okay.
and the importance of tracing the lineage of bishops back to the apostles.
So they're all basically saying that true Christian teaching can be traced back to the apostles themselves.
Right.
And that the bishops are the ones who have been entrusted with safeguarding that teaching.
That's a great way to sum it up.
Hmm.
For example, Clement writes about the apostles appointing bishops and deacons, ensuring the continuation of their ministry.
Okay.
Hegesippus talks about visiting different churches and observing how the bishops in each city maintain the teachings passed down from the apostles.
Wow. So he was like the traveling fact checker
And
for the early
yeah.
church.
Exactly.
Cool.
And Tertullian argues that all churches, even those founded later, can be considered apostolic because they trace their roots back to the original church established by the apostles.
So we're seeing a pattern emerge here.
Yeah.
Scripture, early church fathers, they all seem to point to the importance of this unbroken chain of leadership and teaching.
Right.
It makes me wonder, why did this concept become so central to the Orthodox Church?
Mm-hmm.
What was it about apostolic succession that resonated so deeply with them?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further in our next segment.
Ooh, this is getting interesting.
Yeah.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole mystery.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to see what other clues we uncover as we continue our deep dive into apostolic succession.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Me too.
Okay, so we're back and ready to pick up where we left off.
All right.
We've uncovered some fascinating historical and scriptural clues about apostolic succession,
Yeah.
but I'm still curious, like, why did this concept become so central
Right.
to the Orthodox Church's identity?
It really gets to the heart of how they understand themselves
Okay.
and their relationship with God.
Yeah.
Remember how we talked about apostolic succession being like a spiritual family tree? Well, for the Orthodox Church, that connection goes beyond just historical lineage.
Okay.
It's about a living, breathing link to the apostles, to Christ himself.
So it's not just a historical fact. It's like
Right.
an experience,
Yeah.
a connection that shapes their faith.
Exactly. They believe that this unbroken chain of bishops ensures that the teachings and practices of the early church have been preserved uncorrupted throughout the centuries.
So it's like a guarantee
Yeah.
that they're experiencing Christianity in its most authentic form.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be a powerful idea for people.
Yeah.
But it also seems like it creates kind of a stark dividing line
Right.
between the Orthodox Church and other Christian denominations.
You're hitting on one of the most challenging aspects of this concept. As you know, the Orthodox Church doesn't recognize apostolic succession outside of itself.
Right.
And that has huge implications for how they view their relationship with other Christian groups.
So even if another church could trace its bishops back to the apostles, the Orthodox Church wouldn't consider it valid apostolic succession.
Right, remember the three-legged stool.
Right.
Lineage is important, but it's
Yeah.
meaningless without the other two legs maintaining Orthodox doctrine and being in full communion with other Orthodox bishops.
Okay, so let's say a church has, a clear line of bishops going back to the apostles, and they hold to, what they believe are the core teachings of Christianity.
Right.
What does it mean to be in full communion with other Orthodox bishops?
It's about shared faith and practice.
Okay.
It's about recognizing each other's sacraments, their clergy, their authority.
Okay.
It's about being part of the same spiritual family, so to speak.
Right.
For the Orthodox Church, true unity isn't just about agreeing on some basic theological principles.
Right.
It's about a much deeper connection,
Okay.
a shared experience of the faith that's rooted in apostolic succession.
So it's not just about having the right paperwork.
Right.
It's about being part of a living tradition. But if that's the case, doesn't it make dialogue or cooperation
Yeah.
with other Christian groups incredibly difficult?
Sure.
I mean, if you believe that you're the only ones with the true lineage, the true faith,
Right.
where do you even begin to find common ground?
That's a question that has challenged theologians and church leaders for centuries.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Okay.
But even with this exclusive view of apostolic succession,
Yeah.
the Orthodox Church does recognize that other Christian groups may have some elements of truth.
Right.
They might even acknowledge the validity of some of their sacraments.
So it's not like they're saying everyone else is completely wrong
Right.
or that there's no hope for any kind of unity.
Not necessarily. It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
They believe that full unity, true communion, can only be found within the Orthodox Church,
Okay.
but they don't necessarily write off everyone else as having absolutely nothing to offer.
So it's like they're saying, we believe we have the full picture, but we recognize that others might have pieces of the puzzle. It's kind of like looking through different windows into the same room.
Yeah.
You might see different aspects of it,
Right.
but it's all part of the same reality.
That's a helpful analogy. And it brings us back to the question you raised earlier.
Okay.
What are the implications of this view for the individual listener,
Right.
even if they're not Orthodox?
We've gone deep into history theology,
Yeah.
even a bit of church politics. Why should any of this matter to someone who's just trying to understand their own faith
Right.
or make sense of the different Christian traditions out there?
I think there are several reasons.
Okay.
First, understanding apostolic succession, even if you don't agree with the Orthodox perspective, gives you insight into one of the key claims of the Orthodox Church.
Okay.
It helps you understand why they believe what they believe, why they hold tradition in such high regard, why their bishops have so much authority.
So it's like a key to unlocking their worldview.
Precisely. And even if you're not interested in orthodoxy specifically,
Right.
this concept can help you make sense of the broader landscape of Christianity.
Okay.
You see, many other denominations like Catholicism and Anglicanism also claim apostolic succession.
Right. It's almost like everyone's trying to trace their lineage back
Yeah,
to the same spiritual ancestors.
exactly.
But if the Orthodox Church doesn't recognize any of those claims outside of itself,
Right.
doesn't that create some pretty significant divisions?
It absolutely does. And those divisions have played a huge role in shaping the history of Christianity.
Wow.
Think about the split between the Catholic and Orthodox churches in the 11th century.
Okay, yeah.
Apostolic succession was one of the key issues at the heart of that conflict.
It's almost like they were arguing over who had the more legitimate family tree.
In a way, yes.
Wow.
And those arguments continue to this day.
Really?
Even within denominations that claim apostolic succession. There are often disagreements about what it means and how it should be understood.
So we've got this concept, apostolic succession,
Yeah.
that's shaped church structure, sparked theological debates,
Mm.
and even contributed to major divisions within Christianity.
Right.
But how does this connect to the listener's personal faith journey?
Right.
How can understanding this concept impact how they view their own beliefs and practices?
That's a great question, and it's one that each listener will have to answer for themselves.
Okay.
But I think this exploration of apostolic succession can challenge us to think critically about the sources of our own beliefs.
Mhm.
It prompts us to ask, where do our traditions come from?
Uh-huh.
How have they been passed down?
Okay.
What role does authority play in our faith?
It's like holding a mirror up to our own faith traditions.
Exactly.
Makes us examine where we come from, what we believe, and why we believe it.
Right, and for some listeners, it might even lead them to ask, if apostolic succession is so important, where can it be found?
Good question.
Is it enough for a church to simply claim it, or are there deeper questions to consider?
I can see how those questions could be unsettling for some people.
Yeah.
But isn't that the point of a deep dive?
Sure.
To challenge our assumptions, to push us outside of our comfort zones, to help us see things in new ways.
Absolutely. And sometimes the most uncomfortable questions are the ones that lead to the most profound insights.
Yeah.
I think that's particularly true when we're talking about something as complex and multifaceted as faith.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
We've uncovered ancient controversies, explored scriptural passages,
Mm-hmm.
delved into the intricacies of church history and theology,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all been connected to this one concept, apostolic succession.
Yeah.
I have to say, this deep dive has been incredibly enlightening.
It has.